I just want to take a moment to have you just listen. What do you hear? What are you listening to? I know the story of listening because listening actually saved my life. And it is fitting that I'm telling this story as a story because I am a filmmaker and a creativity and wellness coach. And the origins of story actually come from a time when people were hungry for community and for an answer to their loneliness. And one of my favorite storytellers, Jan Yashinsky, says, change begins when we listen to one another's story. And I like to say that change begins when we listen to one another, period, because neurologically, it is shown that our brains chemically change when we really listen. Cortisol brings focused attention. Oxytocin creates empathy and connection. And as these chemicals mix, changes in behavior can result because trust is earned and we connect more deeply. Safety is created and barriers are removed. According to Webster's dictionary, to listen means, and feel free to read with me with your mute on, to hear what someone has said and to understand that it is serious, important, or true. It also means to pay attention to sound or to hear something with thoughtful attention. I just want to ask you to take a moment and notice the key words in bold. When I was about 3 years old, I began to experience neglect. Now, neglect is traumatic and is the opposite of listening. And that is the reason that I chose to talk about listening for my story. And listening is the answer to neglect. And it literally saved my life. So, what is neglect? Read it with me with your mute on. Neglect means to give little attention or respect to. It means to disregard, to leave undone or unattended to. And that is the opposite of listening. One of the ways that I was neglected was I was expected to know things that I was not taught. And if I did not follow these rules, I was punished. Rules like being too chubby or too out of a box thinker or not being educated, pretty, or popular enough. I have forgiven and know now that my parents and schoolmates were doing the best that they could at the time. Much of what I experienced was unintentional neglect, but as a child and a teen who was looking for her world to give her some answers and to provide a safe place to belong, these responses hurt me and left me feeling very alone and afraid. So, listening is the opposite of neglect. Say this with me with your mute on. Neglect is to give little attention to or respect to disregard. Listening is a way that we can instead connect, understand, and learn. It is a way to healing. It is the answer to neglect and one of the greatest ways we can create safety. How do I know? Because even though I was bullied and neglected both at home and school from a very young age, somehow I made it. The main reason I made it was because someone listened and I felt seen and heard. Trust was established. First, God listened. I realized that maybe some of you do not believe in God, and that is okay. I do. I spent a lot of time in my bedroom alone praying to God when I was little because I was so hurt. But each time I prayed, I gained strength. And one of my favorite verses became Hebrews 13:5. I will never leave you. Of course, the neglect was very confusing for me as a child. And I had parents who told me that they loved me and they did their best to do that. They provided for me all that I needed physically. And yet, when I expressed my opinions and ideas, I felt the sting of unacceptance. And then to be bullied in school on top of it all, I felt stressed everywhere I went. Now I know that it was because I could not attach securely. I did not feel secure, welcome, or valued for who I was by key people in my life. And thankfully, I started to find people who did listen and hear me. Friends, teachers, mentors, and college friends were the beginning of healing for me. And then when I married John, who listened emphatically and by rephrasing, I felt safe at home for the very first time. And even when we could not have children or adopt, something was tough in our business or family, or when I had a serious car accident, I felt that safety and security because he listened. And that leads me to the last reason that I have healed from neglect and am speaking with you today. I listened to myself. I committed to therapy and found healing, which Luann talked about. And on your screen are the consequences of neglect and a summary about what characteristics make a great listener. I am actually literally a miracle when I look at all of these. So, do you see why I chose to have this twisted wire as my story symbol? The wire represents this human story, my story of listening and neglect. In anyone's story, like mine, there is both pain and joy. But when we really listen, when we really seek to understand and hear one another, when we pay thoughtful attention to another, that is when we feel safe and when we heal. That is what that is when what is being shared becomes gold.